I think I could say this just from like living in this world, is that there is this pervasive assumption that that intervention and early interventions and supports cannot be harmful, and that they can't have negative effects. And it's something I talk to my students, my clinicians, their future clinicians, is, you know, one of the first things we say is like, could early intervention cause harm? And I really want to kind of walk them through that, to say absolutely. And there's really no reason to kind of situate ourselves or center ourselves as like heroes who are, you know, uniformly doing good, right? When you start with that perception, you know, there's so much harm that you can do. And so, but I think one of the issues is that because of that pervasive assumption, adverse events and effects and harms aren't tracked in studies. So even just of our studies within our study duration, we're not seeing a lot of good tracking of it, even though Kristen then found evidence of it. And one of those is looking at, you know, are there studies that show significant negative effects where the intervention group is doing, you know, more poorly relative to the comparison group at the intervention. And we found that when we looked in randomized controlled trials, 11% of studies, approximately, I'm going off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure it was 11% of studies had evidence of at least one significant negative effect. And so that's substantial. I mean, like 1/10 of studies are having like negative effects, like with a yikes, right? So that's evidence. You know, attrition, you know, substantial attrition. We're hearing some studies where, you know, there's a lot of families leaving, you know, and that I think is, you know, your other indicator of like, you're not finding this supportive, right? So there are ways to kind of get at that question, even if it hasn't been tracked or reported. And I think Kristen tried to do that. And I think her study was unique. I think it was the first ever, you know.
Yeah, I've never seen anything else
of that. But the other thing we're finding is that studies don't follow up long-term. So my doctoral student, Jenna Crank, is now looking at just what are the long-term studies? And she defined long-term as 6 months or more, because that's what she had to, like how many studies after intervention is over have followed up at least 6 months past. And I think, I mean, there's definitely less than 20. And then when you look even further, like 12 months, then you're getting to like 10, right? There's very few studies. And the longest we have after the intervention is over is like 6 years. So if we wanted to look at if our adverse events, adverse effects, harms, part of what we would need to do is just follow participants for long enough in the first place to look at if it is possible that, you know, those interventions have adverse effects that, you know, really aren't apparent until down the line. And so, I mean, I think those studies are important to do, but they're also going to take a long time. So I think in the meantime, we really need to kind of go back and really just start at the beginning and reconceptualize, like, can interventions and supports be harmful? Yes, we need to keep that in mind. How do we, you know, ensure that we're not? Well, we need to constantly be reflecting on our practice, engaging with the communities that, you know, are the intended beneficiaries of the intervention, listening to them, you know, even when it is uncomfortable. And I'm very familiar with that, you know, saying, oh, this is not good. I'm not doing something that's helpful. It turns out what I thought was helpful wasn't helpful, right? And that's uncomfortable, but it's necessary. And so I think that's kind of what we need to do.
Yeah.